You know how a dog sniffs the ground? It's not just a casual sniff, it's a full body investigation. The nose is down, the tail is up, the whole animal is focused. They're reading a story written in sense that we can't even begin to detect. They can tell you who's been there, when they were there, what they were feeling, and maybe even what they had for lunch. Then there's us. We walk by the same spot and smell. Down maybe some damp earth, a little bit of car exhaust. If we're lucky, the scent of rain on hot pavement. It feels like we got a raw deal. While other animals are living in this rich, vibrant world of smell, we're stuck with a blunt instrument. We use our nose to check if the milk has gone bad, or if we left the gas on. We enjoy the smell of coffee or a good meal, but it feels like a luxury, not a primary tool for survival. So the question is, why? Why is our sense of smell so weak compared to so many other creatures in the animal kingdom? The easy answer, the one you've probably heard, is that we traded it for something better. We traded smell for sight. And there's a lot of truth to that, but the full story is more complicated, more interesting, and it stretches back millions of years. It's a story about trees, brains, genes, and the simple act of standing up on 2 feet. First, let's challenge the premise a little. Is our sense of smell actually weak? Or have we just been told it is for so long that we believe it? For over a century, scientists believed humans were pretty pathetic when it came to olfaction, our sense of smell. This idea was pushed by a 19th century brain scientist named Paul Broca. He looked at the human brain and saw that our olfactory bulb, the part that processes smell, was tiny compared to the rest of our brain, especially our massive frontal lobes. He concluded that humans, with our free will and intelligence, had evolved beyond the need for a powerful sense of smell. Smell was for animals, driven by instinct. We were thinkers, driven by reason. This idea stuck. It made a certain kind of sense. It fit neatly into the narrative of human exceptionalism, that we are above the base animal world. For 100 years, this was the accepted wisdom in textbooks and scientific papers. The problem is, it's not entirely true. Recent research has started to push back against this old idea. A neuroscientist named John McGann at Rutgers University has been a big voice in this. He argues that we've been systematically underestimating ourselves. Sure, our olfactory bulb is small relative to our total brain size, but our brain is ridiculously large. In absolute terms, our olfactory bulb is actually quite big and has a huge number of neurons. And when we test humans, it turns out we can be amazing smellers. We can distinguish between a staggering number of different odors. Some estimates say 1 trillion, though that number is debated. The point is, it's a lot. We are also incredibly sensitive to certain smells. We can detect some compounds at concentrations of a few parts per trillion. That's like finding one specific blade of grass in 1,000 football fields covered in grass. We're particularly good at smelling things that have been important to our survival, like the compounds in ripe fruit or spoiled meat. There are even studies showing that humans, if they practice, can track a scent trail through a field just like a dog. They have to get down on their hands and knees with their nose to the ground, and it's slow and awkward. But they can do it. The ability is there, latent and untrained. So if our sense of smell isn't as pathetic as we thought, why does it feel so weak? Why don't we use it like a dog does? This is where the evolutionary story really begins. We don't use it because over millions of years, our ancestors' priorities changed. We didn't lose our sense of smell so much as we let it fall into the background. And the main reason for this was the spectacular rise of another sense vision. Think about our very distant primate ancestors tens of millions of years ago. They were small creatures, probably living in trees. Life in the trees is a very three-dimensional world. You're leaping from branch to branch, judging distances, avoiding falls. You're also looking for food. This ripe fruit stands out with its bright colors against the green leaves. Spotting a predator like a snake camouflage on a branch is a matter of life and death. In this environment, good eyesight is a massive advantage, especially a specific kind of eyesight. Our ancestors developed forward-facing eyes. This is different from, say, a horse or a rabbit whose eyes are on the sides of their head. Side-facing eyes give you a wide panoramic view, which is great for spotting a predator sneaking up on you from any direction. But it's terrible for depth perception. Forward-facing eyes create a large overlap in the field of view of each eye. The brain takes the two slightly different images and combines them to create a single three-dimensional image. This is called stereoscopic vision. It gives you incredible depth perception. For a creature leaping through the trees, the ability to know exactly where that next branch is everything. Miss it. and you fall. At the same time, many primates, including our ancestors, developed trichromatic color vision. This means we have three types of color detecting cone cells in our eyes, sensitive to red, green, and blue light. Most mammals are dichromats. They only have two types, a bit like a person who is red-green colorblind. Why did we develop this third cone? The leading theory is that it helped us find food. It makes it much easier to spot a ripe reddish or yellowish fruit against a background of green leaves. Or to distinguish young, tender, more nutritious leaves from older, tougher ones. So you have this pressure cooker of natural selection pushing for better and better vision. Better depth perception, better color detection. This requires a lot of brain power. The visual cortex, the part of the brain that processes information from the eyes, is huge in humans. It takes up a massive portion of our cerebral real estate, and a brain is a metabolically expensive organ. It uses a disproportionate amount of the body's energy. There's a limit to how big it can get and how much energy it can consume. Evolution is all about trade-offs. You can't be a master of everything. There's a concept of a brain budget. If you spend a lot of your neural budget on one sense, you have less to spend on others. As our ancestors invested more and more in their visual processing centers, the parts of the brain dedicated to smell started to get less attention. They didn't disappear, but they were no longer the star player. The snout began to shrink. A long snout, like a dog's, is great for smelling. It's packed with olfactory receptors and helps channel air over them. But it also gets in the way of your vision. As our faces flattened, our vision became less obstructed, but our smelling apparatus became less prominent. This wasn't a conscious choice, of course. It was a slow, gradual process over millions of years. The primates who happened to have slightly better vision were more likely to survive, find food, and have offspring. The ones who relied more on smell might not have done as well in that particular tree-dwelling environment. Vision was becoming the dominant sense for navigating the world, and our brains and bodies were remodeling themselves to reflect that. But this brain trade-off is only part of the story. To see the next chapter, we have to look at our DNA. Our genes tell a very clear story about our relationship with smell. Inside the nucleus of our cells, we have the blueprint for building a human being. Part of that blueprint includes genes for olfactory receptors. You can think of these receptors as tiny, specialized docks on the surface of neurons in our nose. A specific sixth scent molecule floats by, say, from a rose or a piece of bacon. It fits into a corresponding receptor dock, like a key in a lock. This triggers a signal that travels to the brain, which then interprets it as a particular smell. The more types of receptor docks you have, the more smells you can distinguish. It's like having a bigger keyboard. A creature with 1,000 different types of receptors can play a much more complex and nuanced smell song than a creature with only 100. So what does our genetic keyboard look like? Well, it looks like it's seen better days. All humans have about 900 genes in the olfactory receptor family, but when you look closely, you find that more than half of them are broken. They're what scientists call pseudogenes. They're still there in our DNA like fossils. You can see that they were once functional genes for smelling, but somewhere along our evolutionary line, a mutation occurred that switched them off. They no longer produce a working receptor dock. It's like having a huge panel of light switches, but over half of them are broken in the off position. The lights will never turn on. Now compare this to a dog. A dog has about the same number of olfactory receptor genes in total, but only about 20% of them are broken. They have around 800 working smell genes. We have fewer than 400. Mice, which rely heavily on smell, have over 1,000 working smell genes. This genetic graveyard is the smoking gun. It's concrete evidence that our ancestors had a much better sense of smell than we do today. Over time, as we relied less on smell for our day-to-day survival, mutations that broke these genes were no longer a big deal. Think about it from a survival perspective. If you're an early mammal scurrying around in the dark, and a mutation breaks a gene you need to smell a predator, you get eaten. That broken gene doesn't get passed on. Natural selection keeps the smelling system finely tuned. But now imagine one of our primate ancestors high up in the trees with fantastic color vision. A mutation breaks one of its many smell genes. Does it matter? Probably not. It can still see the ripe fruit, it can still spot the snake. Its survival doesn't depend on that one specific scent receptor. So the broken gene isn't weeded out. It might get passed on to its offspring. Over millions of years, these broken genes accumulate. The system degrades because there's no longer strong selective pressure to maintain it in perfect working order. It's a classic case of use it or lose it written in our DNA. So we have the brain trade-off and the genetic decay. But there's a third major event in our history that put another nail in the coffin of our olfactory dominance. And that was the moment our ancestors stood up. Bipedalism, the act of walking on two legs, was a monumental shift in our lineage. It happened several million years ago, long after we had already invested heavily in vision. Standing up had huge advantages. It freed our hands to carry food, tools, and babies. It allowed us to see over tall grass on the savannah, to spot predators or find carcasses to scavenge. It was also a more energy-efficient way to travel long distances. But it had one massive consequence for our sense of smell. It lifted our noses several feet off the ground. The ground is where the action is, scent-wise. It's a tapestry of information. Scent trails left by prey or predators are laid down on the ground. The smell of roots, tubers, fungi, and small burrowing animals is in the soil. The moisture on the ground holds onto scent molecules, releasing them slowly. A dog, a wolf, or a bear lives with its nose in this world. Their entire reality is shaped by this ground-level information stream. When we stood up, we disconnected ourselves from that world. Our noses were suddenly up in the wind. The air carries scents, of course, but it's a different kind of information. It's more diffuse, less concentrated. It's good for detecting something distant, like smoke from a fire or the smell of rain coming. But it's terrible for following a specific trail. The information is scattered and jumbled by air currents. This simple physical change reinforced the shift that was already happening. Vision became even more important for navigating our immediate environment because smell was no longer a reliable guide for what was right under our feet. Our hands, now free, took on an exploratory role that the snout used to play. Instead of sniffing a strange object to figure out what it is, we could pick it up, turn it over, feel its texture, poke it with a stick. We outsourced the job of close-range investigation from our nose to our hands and eyes. This combination of factors, each the brain prioritizing vision, the decay of our olfactory genes, and the physical act of standing up created a perfect storm. Over millions of years, our primary sense for understanding the world shifted decisively from the nose to the eyes. We became visual creatures. Smell was relegated to a supporting role. But here's the fascinating part. It didn't disappear, and the parts that remained are incredibly important. Evolution doesn't just throw things away if they aren't useful. Sometimes it repurposes them. Our sense of smell might not be our primary tool for finding food or avoiding predators anymore, but it took on a new and powerful role in our lives as highly social, emotional beings. This is all about brain wiring. The path that scent information takes to the brain is unique among our senses. Information from our eyes, ears, and skin goes first to a brain region called the thalamus, which acts like a sort of central switchboard, sorting the information and relaying it to the appropriate higher processing areas. Smell is different. The olfactory bulb has a direct superhighway connection to the parts of the brain that handle emotion and memory. Specifically, it plugs right into the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, and the hippocampus, which is crucial for forming long-term memories. This is not an accident. This is an ancient connection. For an early animal, associating a smell with a powerful emotion or memory is critical for survival. The smell of a predator must trigger immediate fear amygdala. The smell of a nutritious food source should be logged in your memory so you can find it again hippocampus. The smell of a potential mate needs to trigger a response. The smell of something rotten must create disgust. Because of this direct wiring, smell has a power over our emotions and memories that no other sense can match. It's why the smell of baking bread can instantly transport you back to your grandmother's kitchen 30 years ago. It's not just a memory, you can almost feel the emotions of that moment. This is called the Proustian effect, named after the author Marcel Proust, who wrote about a flood of childhood memories triggered by the taste and smell of a Madeleine cookie dipped in tea. This emotional connection is still profoundly important for us. It's a huge part of how we experience the world. The enjoyment of food is mostly about smell, not taste. Taste buds can only detect 5 basic qualities: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. The thousands of nuanced flavors in a meal and the difference between a raspberry and a cherry or between basil and oregano are all detected by your sense of smell as molecules travel up the back of your throat to your nasal cavity. That's why food tastes so bland when you have a cold and your nose is blocked. Smell also plays a subtle but vital role in our social lives. We don't consciously sniff each other like dogs do, but we are constantly picking up on chemical cues. We can smell fear and stress in other people's sweat. Babies can recognize their own mother's unique scent just hours after birth, which is fundamental to bonding. There is evidence that we subconsciously choose mates based on their smell, which can be an indicator of a healthy and genetically compatible immune system. So, while our ancestors were losing the ability to track a deer through the forest by scent, they were keeping and refining the parts of the olfactory system that helped them navigate a new, more complex environment, the social world. Knowing who is family, who is a friend, who is sick, who is scared, so these things became just as important for survival as knowing where the fruit trees were. Our sense of smell was repurposed for social and emotional intelligence, and this brings us to the modern world. We now live in an environment that is almost hostile to our sense of smell. We are obsessed with sanitizing and deodorizing our world. We use harsh cleaners to eliminate all natural odors from our homes. We scrub our bodies with soaps and cover them with artificial perfumes and colognes. We live in climate controlled boxes sealed off from the rich, complex smells of the natural world. In a way, we are continuing the process that started millions of years ago. We are further diminishing the role of smell in our lives. We are training ourselves to ignore it, to consider natural body odor a social taboo, and to prefer artificial, simple scents to the complex, information-rich smells of reality. So, why is our sense of smell so weak? The answer is a long story. It's weak because our primate ancestors moved into the trees and began to rely on their eyes to navigate a three-dimensional world. It's weak because our brains made a trade-off, investing heavily in processing vision at the expense of olfaction. It's weak because, without a strong need for it, our smell-related genes were allowed to break and fall into disuse. It's weak because we stood up on two legs and lifted our noses far away from the world of scent trails on the ground. But it's also not weak at all, it's specialized. We traded a high-fidelity, general-purpose smelling system for one that is exquisitely tuned to emotion, memory, and social connection. We don't use it to hunt, but we use it to love. We don't use it to hide from predators, but we use it to feel at home. It operates in the background, shaping our moods, triggering our memories, and guiding our relationships in ways we are barely conscious of. The dog sniffing the ground is reading the day's news. We are not. We are reading a different kind of story. We might catch a whiff of perfume that reminds us of our first love, or the smell of salt water that brings back a childhood vacation. These moments feel profound because they are tapping into one of the oldest and most direct pathways in our brain. Our sense of smell is not a relic. It's a direct line to our emotional core, a quiet but powerful narrator of our own personal history. We may have walked away from the world of scent, but it has never truly walked away from us.